I wasn't planning on staying long. Weddings aren't really my place. Too many people I half recognize, too many conversations that circle back to what I'm doing with my life. I'd been ducking questions all afternoon, refilling my glass with soda to look busy, lingering outside for air when the small talk got too tight. That's where I saw her. She was standing by the fence at the edge of the lawn, holding a half-empty wine glass, watching the kids chase each other near the string lights. She didn't look dressed for attention. Simple navy dress, hair pinned back like she hadn't decided whether she cared to be here either. But her stillness carried weight. Like everyone else was in motion, and she was quietly outside of it. I almost walked past. But she caught my eye in that offhand way people do when they've run out of patience for crowds. A glance, nothing more. Still, it slowed me. "You've been out here a while," she said. Her voice wasn't teasing. Just an observation. She tilted her glass, the wine clinging to the side. "Yeah," I said. "Crowds aren't really my thing." "Me either." She smiled, faint but real. "But they keep refilling my glass, so—" The way she said it wasn't funny, exactly, but I laughed. "Too quick." She noticed, and the corner of her mouth twitched like she hadn't expected me to. We stood in that small silence that usually ends with someone excusing themselves. I thought she would. Instead, she asked, "You're what, the groom's cousin?" "Neighbor," I said. "Well, used to be. I moved back a few months ago." Something flickered in her eyes. "Recognition, maybe? I thought I knew your face. You were the one with the bike. Always leaving it in the driveway." "Yeah." I shifted my drink from one hand to the other. "That was me." She didn't fill the silence with more. Just sipped her wine, eyes back on the kids. Her hands were steady. I noticed that. I've been noticing a lot lately. Maybe because I've had too much time. Moving back home at 24 isn't the worst thing, but it does something to the air. Makes everything feel paused. My phone's full of half-written texts I never send. "Hey, you around?" Or, "Forget it, never mind." I keep meaning to delete them, but somehow don't. With her, I didn't feel the need to speak right away. "Do you come to these things often?" I asked finally. "Weddings?" She gave me a look, light but unreadable. "Not if I can help it." There was something about the way she said it, like she'd been through enough of them to know. A shout from the lawn pulled her attention. A child tumbling near the fence. She tensed, then relaxed when the kids scrambled back up laughing. Her shoulders eased, and I realized I'd been holding my breath too. "You want to sit?" she asked. "There's a bench over there. Better than standing like we're waiting for a bus." We crossed the grass. She walked slow, deliberate. I noticed how she held her glass away from her dress, careful but not delicate. I followed, hands awkward in my pockets, and when we sat the bench creaked like it hadn't been used in a while. We didn't face each other directly. Just angled enough to trade glances without committing. "What brought you back?" she asked. I stared at my soda. "Didn't work out where I was?" She nodded once. No advice, no follow-up. Just sat with it. That silence felt heavier than the music from the tent. The night leaned colder, and someone from the party called her name in the distance. She didn't move right away. Neither did I. Then she stood, smoothing her dress. "Well," she said, "maybe I'll see you around." "Neighbor." Her hand brushed mine as she passed back the glass. Not intentional. Not avoided either. Later, when I checked my phone in the empty kitchen, there was a new message from an unknown number. "Next time, don't hide outside all night. I'll save you a seat." I read it 3 times before setting the phone down, my thumb hovering over the screen that I told myself it didn't mean much. A text, a seat saved. Maybe she just didn't want me looking like a loner again. But a week later I saw her. I was coming back from the store, arms full of groceries I didn't need, when I noticed her porch light on. She was sitting outside, mug in hand, reading something too thick for leisure. She looked up at the sound of my footsteps. "You shop like someone trying to avoid a list," she said. I looked down at the 2 bags. Cereal, bread, 3 cans of soup, and a jar of olives. No plan at all. Caught, I said. She smiled and pushed the book aside. You want tea? You'll only end up burning that soup. I didn't argue. Her kitchen was neat but lived in, stacked mail on the counter, a dish towel draped crooked over the sink. She set a kettle on, moving with the kind of ease that comes from doing everything alone. You always read outside? I asked. Not always. Just when the house feels too quiet. She leaned against the counter. It's worse after my daughter visits. Noise, laughter, the mess of someone else's shoes at the door, and then nothing. Her eyes softened, almost apologetic, like she'd said too much. You're divorced? I asked carefully. 5 years now. She tapped the edge of the mug in front of her. Long enough that it shouldn't feel like news. I nodded, not knowing where to place my hands. She noticed. I saw her glance at the way I kept shifting them, folding and unfolding against the table. Your turn, she said. For what? Confession. I let out a breath, staring at the steam rising from the kettle. I thought moving back would feel temporary. Like I'd just reset and leave again. But now, I don't know. Feels like I got stuck between chapters. The whistle began, sharp and urgent. She turned it off, and the silence after felt almost intimate. She poured the tea, sliding a mug across the counter toward me. Her hand lingered on the rim for half a second too long. Or maybe I just noticed more than I should. Getting stuck happens, she said. Doesn't mean it's permanent. I wanted to believe her. But sitting in that kitchen, with her so close, I knew the risk wasn't about being stuck. It was about what I was letting myself imagine. The air between us shifted. I could picture it too clearly, staying longer than tea, asking questions that weren't neighborly, waiting for her to look at me the way I'd looked at her by the fence. Instead, I sipped the tea. Too hot, but I didn't wince. When I left, she walked me to the door. No words, just a quiet step behind me. At the threshold, she reached out, not for me, but for the grocery bag slipping from my grip. Her fingers brushed mine, steadying it. Careful, she murmured. It was nothing. It was everything. And walking back across the yard, I kept hearing her voice, low and unhurried. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I hadn't planned to see her again that week. But the universe, or some tiny habit of mine, had other ideas. She was at the laundromat. The fluorescent lights hummed, washing machines thrummed, and the smell of detergent hung sharp in the air. I froze for a second, watching her bend over a basket, sorting colors from whites. Hey, I said. She straightened, a sock dangling from one hand. Her eyes flicked up, and something passed there, surprise, maybe a flicker of delight. Or maybe it was just irritation at being caught mid-task. Hey, she said. Her voice careful. Measured. I moved closer, picking up a stray quarter off the floor. Something in the rhythm of her movements made me pause. She was quiet, methodical, but the silence was loud. You always do laundry on Wednesday? I asked. Always, she said. You. Occasionally. My hands shoved into pockets. I wasn't ready to explain why I'd wandered in. We worked in parallel, the machines washing, the dryer tumbling, the metallic clangs punctuating the quiet. I kept noticing little things, how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, how her shoulders stiffened when a man at the next machine laughed too loudly. You look tired, I said. Her fingers froze mid-sort. I'm fine. But she wasn't. The slight dip of her eyes, the tightening at her jaw, small cracks I couldn't ignore. I wanted to reach across the folding table, to brush my fingers against hers when she handed me a sock she'd picked out. I didn't. Not yet. A phone buzzed, and she jumped slightly. I realized I'd been holding my breath. She glanced at the screen, a faint frown. A text from her daughter, probably. She set it down without responding. I wanted to ask, "Do you want to talk?" But the words felt heavy. We folded shirts in silence. Sometimes our elbows bumped. Each time, the brief contact lingered longer than necessary. My thumb brushed against her wrist once. She didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. But she didn't look at me either. A man at the next machine cleared his throat loudly. She laughed nervously, a soft sound that made my chest ache. "Careful," I muttered under my breath, and she looked up, and for a second the room seemed smaller. I imagined leaning in. Closer. Closer. Her scent, like coffee left in a cold mug, like rain on the fence last week. And then someone's phone rang. I flinched. She jumped slightly. The moment broke. I should go," she said, collecting her laundry, her movements brisk. "Right," I said. My voice too loud, too awkward. At the door, she paused. Just for a heartbeat. I thought she might look at me, say something more. Maybe step closer. But she didn't. Not yet. And still, when I left, I couldn't stop seeing her there, bent over the folding table, sock in hand, pretending the world wasn't collapsing a little inside me. I wanted to reach out. Just once. Just enough to see if she'd let me. It was past 6 when I found her on the park bench, the sky bruised with early evening clouds. The city had started to quiet, and the usual hum of cars and distant voices felt muted, as if the world had pressed pause. She was alone, sipping lukewarm tea from a travel mug. The bench creaked under her weight. I hesitated, standing a step behind the edge of the path, unsure if I should interrupt or retreat. "You came," she said, not looking up. "I wasn't sure I should." She shrugged. "Maybe you shouldn't." I sat beside her anyway, careful not to crowd. Our knees almost touched. I noticed the way her fingers curled around the mug, small knuckles white with tension. "Why do you always do this?" she asked softly, voice nearly drowned by the distant bark of a dog. "Invite me to be here, and then act like it's nothing?" I swallowed. "I don't know. I guess I just—" My words caught in my throat. She looked at me then, eyes wide, searching, almost accusing. "Do you know what it's like? To feel like someone notices you. Really notices. And then you're left wondering if it's just a trick of the light?" Her confession hit me harder than I expected. I kept my hands folded on my knees, waiting for her to finish. "I hate myself for thinking about it," she added after a pause, a half-laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Even knowing it's impossible." Impossible. That word tasted bitter. I wanted to tell her it wasn't impossible. That I'd been imagining the same things, every quiet detail, every brush of her fingers against mine. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "I don't know what you mean." And I meant it. Partly to protect her. Partly to protect myself. We lapsed into silence, the kind that presses against your chest, heavy and waiting. The mug between her hands steamed faintly. I noticed a stray lock of hair falling over her face. My fingers itched to tuck it behind her ear. I didn't. She glanced at me, and for a fleeting moment, the world contracted to the two of us. "You don't know how much I've missed this," she whispered, voice low, like she'd almost revealed too much. I wanted to say, "You're not alone. I feel it too." But the words stayed inside, tangled with the doubt that had been following me since the laundromat, since the wedding, since that first glance across the fence. Instead, I asked a question I didn't know the answer to. "What happens if we can't stop noticing each other?" Her lips parted, then pressed together again. Her hands tightened slightly on the mug. She didn't answer. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and electric. The sky above darkened, and a lone streetlight flickered on, casting half our faces in shadow. I wanted to reach for her. Just a hand, just a touch. Just to see if she'd let me. But I didn't. And maybe that pause, the one loaded with possibility, was the most intimate thing we'd shared yet. The next week, she didn't text. I checked my phone obsessively, thumb hovering over the keyboard, ready to type something, anything, but I didn't. I told myself she was busy. Work, errands, maybe her daughter. I told myself I wasn't reading too much into it. But my chest tightened every time it vibrated, and I found myself scanning the apartment complex for her car. When I finally saw her in the courtyard, she glanced past me, smiled faintly, and walked on. No pause, no glance back. The same bench where we had shared tea sat empty. I tried to keep my distance, but my legs carried me anyway. I ended up at the edge of the fountain, pretending to check a text. I noticed her hands, folding laundry, stirring coffee, flipping a book page, always precise, always contained. But she kept her distance. Busy week? I asked when I caught up, forcing my voice to stay casual. She looked at me, eyes just long enough to recognize me, then away. Something like that. Something like that. Something she didn't explain. Something I didn't ask. I imagined all the possibilities. The ex she never mentions, the daughter who needs her attention, the divorce papers that still littered the drawer at home. The unknown gnawed at me more than anything said outright. When I tried to step closer, she retreated, just subtly enough that it hurt more than if she'd drawn a line. My words stumbled. I thought maybe. But she didn't wait. She tilted her head, a soft, practiced smile, and walked toward the apartment door. I froze. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Just pause. The air seemed heavier, every sound distant. At night, I found myself staring at the phone, drafting messages I'd never send. I don't understand what I did wrong. I miss seeing you, even for a minute. Do you want me around? Each one stayed unsent. The emptiness wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, like the quiet between two notes in a song that keeps looping. I tried to convince myself it was normal. She needed space, I needed patience. But the thought of her avoiding the bench, the tea, the shared silences, was unbearable. I imagined her laughing with someone else, someone closer to her age, someone less complicated. My stomach twisted, and then I realized it wasn't jealousy. It was confusion. It was being paused mid-motion, watching something important slip sideways. Days passed. The bench remained empty. The mail stacked up. I kept walking by, sometimes for no reason, sometimes hoping just to catch the flicker of recognition in her eyes. And still, no message. No invitation. No explanation. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I left the gate ajar that night, imagining her walking up, her hand brushing mine over the latch. I left the tea cold on the counter. I left the thought of asking, of saying something unsaid. And for once, I couldn't force the story forward. The rain had started in the late afternoon. I didn't mind it, mostly because I had no choice but to walk past her house on my way home. The clouds hung low, and the air smelled like wet pavement and cut grass. She was on the porch, a scarf wrapped loosely around her neck, holding a mug that steamed in the gray light. Her hair was damp at the ends, clinging to her collarbone. I paused at the gate, unsure if I should knock, call out, or just keep walking. My hands were empty, but my chest felt full of words I didn't know how to shape. "You're out in this," she said, voice low. Not accusing. Just noting. "Yeah," I said. "I needed to see if you were okay." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sipped her tea, gaze on the horizon. Her shoulders sagged slightly, like the weight of days spent holding back words was suddenly pressing. "I thought maybe you weren't coming back," I said. The sentence trailed off. Her eyes found mine, hesitant. I wasn't sure I should. There it was. The confession we'd both been circling, quiet, unadorned, and raw. I don't know why I kept hoping," I admitted, stepping closer, careful not to invade the space she'd claimed. "But I did." She blinked. Her hands shook slightly as she set the mug down. "I was afraid," she said. "Afraid that," she swallowed, "that it would change everything if I let myself care." I wanted to reach for her, to steady her hand, to let her see that my hope mirrored hers. But I paused. That pause was all the vulnerability that mattered. I don't want to hurt you, I whispered. I know, she said. And then, after a long pause, I don't want to lose myself either. We stood there in the drizzle, the porch light reflecting in tiny puddles at our feet. The air carried the quiet weight of weeks spent imagining each other, of glances that lingered too long, of unsent messages that meant everything and nothing. I lifted my hand slowly, almost testing her, letting it hover near her scarf. She didn't flinch. She didn't move closer. She just let the space exist for a heartbeat, long enough for both of us to decide that this moment, this fragile bridge, was worth it. Her fingers brushed mine, light. Not a declaration. Not a promise. Just a recognition. Okay, she said softly. I smiled. Small, almost ashamed, but honest. Okay. The rain fell around us, steady and unrelenting, and for the first time in weeks, the world felt aligned, not perfect, not declared, but real. We didn't speak again that evening. Words weren't needed. The touch, the acknowledgement, the shared quiet were enough. And for now, that was everything. Weeks turned into months, and the rain-streaked evenings became ordinary. I'd walk past her porch, and sometimes she'd be there, mug in hand, hair pinned back like always, but no urgency in her gaze, just the calm of someone who'd decided life could wait a little while. We settled into small routines. Coffee on the weekend, her black, my tepid, but always with a biscuit or two on the side. The bench by the park, exactly where the sunset hit the puddles just right, became ours. We never spoke much at first, letting the silence build the trust words couldn't. I'd leave at 8:47 a.m. sometimes, just to see her half-asleep smile when I passed the window. She'd gesture for the tea I'd made too strong or leave a note on the counter. You took the wrong mug again, idiot. And I'd laugh softly to myself, realizing this was how ordinary love felt. Not explosive, not cinematic, just quietly essential. She told me little stories about her daughter, about the mundane victories and minor embarrassments of daily life. I listened, sometimes interrupting with a clumsy joke or a memory from my own week. And sometimes we didn't speak at all, just sharing the rhythm of the day, the small shifts in posture, the way hands brushed against plates or mugs. There were mornings when I'd arrive too early, and she'd shake her head at me, saying, "You're early enough to make the world jealous." She didn't say it affectionately, exactly, but I knew she meant it. The warmth in that half-teasing tone stayed with me all day. Evenings on the bench, rain or shine, became a quiet confirmation that we'd chosen each other in the pauses. No grand declarations, no fireworks, just two people noticing one another, day after day. I realized I hadn't needed the near confessions or the almost moments of heartbreak to appreciate this. The slow rhythm, the gentle compromises, the minor attentions, these were the parts that counted. The tea, the black coffee, the forgotten scarves, the quiet, OKs, they were the weight of care, more substantial than words ever could be. One evening, when the bench was wet but the air soft, she leaned slightly against me, just a nudge, just enough. I felt the ordinary gravity of it, the smell of her coat, the warmth of her hand brushing mine. And I knew. Not with certainty, not with a dramatic epiphany, but with the slow, quiet clarity that comes from watching someone show up for you every single day. I didn't need more. We didn't speak. Didn't need to. That bench, that mug, that moment, those were ours. And as I walked home that night, the streets damp and glistening, I thought, maybe this was all love really needed. Simple, earned, familiar. Enough to make the world feel a little softer. And for us, that was everything. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?